Well, everybody, this is my first recording since I had COVID. And so my voice
Oh, I
sounds a
didn't know
little
that.
funny. Yeah. And so if I cough, forgive me. We'll try to get that out of the episode. But I'm really excited because ever since I was in California this summer, I've learned about and wanted to have Jenn on the Flower Podcast. Welcome, Jenn.
Hello. Thank you for having me. This is very exciting.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And it's just fun to be able to just to sit back and have a cup of coffee or your beverage of choice, and depending
hmm
on your time of day, uh, and just have a conversation about things that we love working with, which is flowers and the business behind it. So,
hmm
and so I always have to ask me, my first question, everybody knows I want to ask, is how did you get into the world of flowers?
Well, I was actually thinking about it. Like, I always say the same thing. Like, it's rehearsed at this point because I've been in the flower world for like 10 years. And then I'm like, let's just like try to like rethink about really what it is, which is, it's interesting because I fell into it and I always say that. But then I'm like, what does that even mean? I, it's like ambiguous. Really, I was 18, 19, and I just had my sister got married. I had a couple friends getting married. Didn't think of it as a career like that at all. It was more actually my first interaction with flowers. I applied when I was 16 to work at Conroy's. Did they have one of those there? It's like a teleflora shop.
No, I don't think so.
They might be in California, Southern California. And there's one around the corner from my house growing up. And I was like, I'm going to go apply at Conroy's. And they like were like, sorry, we are not hiring unexperienced people. And so that was my first little
Ouch.
moment. And I was like, "Oh, I guess I'll never be a florist." I just probably thought that, very serious teenager I was. But then I was working at Starbucks, going to college, like had different things in mind. But randomly I had friends and family getting married and I was like, sure, I'll do your flowers. Went to the LA market and I was like, wait, this place is crazy. So many people, so many flowers
Yes.
and flowers I'd never seen before. And I think, to be fair, it took me a while. It took me a few years of doing that, you know, just on the side to actually think, hey, I think there's money in this and I can actually have a career from it. So that zoomed forward a few years. And then meeting my husband actually really encouraged me because I met him when I was 20, right when I turned 21. We got married when I was 22, super young, but he went to school for business. So he was just really encouraging and had a lot of really good practical advice for things. And really, it was just the demand. Like, so I started my business in 2014 officially, but then 2013, I was like, I'm going to do a trial run. I'm going to take every wedding. I'm going to get all serious, get a business license. And it was that year that I was like, I think I could do this. I still was a waitress in Malibu for about 3 or 4 years for the beginning of my business. Probably could have stayed on a little longer, but I had this idea that like this weird idea that, oh, well, it's not real until it's like my full-time thing, which is not true. I always like
Right.
to say like, don't leave your day job. I didn't need to. It was more of this weird identity thing, right? Like, can I really even call myself a florist if I'm serving 3 or 4 days a week? And yeah, you can. You can do a lot of things.
Thanks for
But
saying that.
yeah,
I appreciate that.
yeah, it's so true. And I still know really talented people who are florists, but then have a full-time job or a part-time job. And I don't know. My idea that has evolved so much over the years, like, and you don't need to be defined by that. Like, and I made good money as a server. So I could have stayed for a few years longer, but I left and I have a knack for making things more complicated in life. Like I like the challenge. Like, why not? Let's just throw it out there, see what happens. So now this is my 8th year of business since 2014. Is that the correct math? And yeah, here we are. Like things have evolved so much. And every year, maybe even every job, I'm like, I'm still doing this for a living. That's crazy. Yeah, every job. I for sure think that. Especially with like family and friends I talk to, and you're talking about the details of a job you have coming up, and they're like, wait, someone's spending how much money on in flowers? And I'm like, yeah, when you say, don't say that, because then it makes me think too hard about it. It is really crazy, but I'm so grateful that it's an industry. Like, wow, I don't know what I'd be doing for a career now.
Well, it's
So,
interesting you say that because where I used to work, selling flowers to high-end events was just part of my everyday thing, right? I mean, that's just what I did. And you start talking budgets with people outside of our world, and they just think it's crazy, crazy amounts of money. But they don't realize there are people out there that spend crazy amounts of money on frivolous things all of the time,
all the time.
and that's what keeps so many of our small businesses in business.
Yes.
um and people don't make that connection, and I feel like that sometimes comes out in how we price things ourselves, or our own self-confidence in things. I'm just glad to hear you say that, because I feel like it's an area that a lot of people struggle with.
It is really hard, and that's one area that my husband was like. I'll probably reference him a lot because I obviously love him. We've been together we just celebrated our 8-year anniversary, but he's just really smart, and he's not just smart, but like street smart, and has a lot of like wisdom when it comes to business, and of course went to school for it. But one of the things that we talked about early on in pricing things, and I still have that. Like I still have times where I'm quoting something and I sit down and I do the math, and it's more accurate probably now than even when I started. Like I know I'm going to need 35 bunches of this, and I do the math. I'm looking at the pricing sheet for my wholesaler, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, it just feels uncomfortable to send this proposal, but I feel more confident now. And I guess I feel I'm more at peace with just like moving past that feeling, like letting it happen. Yeah, it's uncomfortable because maybe I wouldn't spend that, but that it's relative. That's what he taught me. And what we talked a lot about was like money is relative to the person. And even in like the income bracket that I'm in, and maybe my friends, like someone that's, same bracket as me, it's like bracket, what a weird thing. Same,
I get
so
it.
we might spend money super differently,
Right.
and I think
Like, what's a
being
priority for you? What's a priority for you versus what's a priority for them? And it comes out in how we spend our
totally,
money. Yeah.
it's so true. Like we spend ample amounts on our garden, and some people, we might look at somebody else that goes out to eat a lot more than maybe we do, but it's really six or one half dozen. Like it's the same. It's just depends on how you spend it. And yeah, assigning like any emotion to pricing is like really dangerous, but I try not to, I don't shame myself anymore for having those feelings come up when I'm doing a proposal, because it's inevitable. Like it is different. And my husband also, he's a custom cabinet maker. And so we also service the same kind of clientele. Like we
Mhm.
couldn't afford ourselves. Like I couldn't afford me as a florist, and he couldn't afford his cabinetry that he prices. But that's what is a lot of the mental hurdles in pricing things. But yeah, like I said, just getting comfortable with the numbers of it. But I'm so intrigued that you were in sales and all that, because it's a totally different world of the flower industry that like I'm sure I could like learn so much, and I'm just very intrigued by it. How long were you doing it for?
Oh, wow. 26 and a half years. A
Oh
really
my
long
gosh.
time. Yeah. Yeah. And so, and I enjoyed it. I mean, I really did enjoy it, because first of all, I enjoy working with creative people like yourself. Two, I like being sort of, and that was one of the hard parts about starting a podcast 3 years ago, was I enjoy being behind the scenes. I enjoy
Mm-hmm.
being the wind beneath your wings sort of thing,
Love it.
yeah, I enjoy that. I enjoy being able to someone give me a palette and then give me their wish list, and not only fulfill the wish list, but embellish it with things I think will add value and still stay in budget.
Right.
And usually, I mean, most of my customers, well, I would say all of my customers, appreciated that skill set that I brought to things, and and saw the value in that. So even though we may not have been the cheapest, people appreciated what I did, and I think that's something. And it's so funny too, because I always feel like the wholesaler ends up being like the bartender for florists. And so I'm the one they spill their guts to, and I'm the one that, we
Right.
troubleshoot, or, they're having employee issues and we talk about it, and, whatever. And I've had my hands in so many areas of the industry. I've had clients who do, $1 million weddings. I have clients who do hotel, 5-star hotel, weekly corporate work, that kind of thing. I had flower shops who were FTDs. I mean, I had the whole gamut
Yeah, a major
of,
spectrum.
yeah. So, and over that many years, oh, grocery stores. I sold to grocery stores for a long time. So, I mean,
Oh
all of
wow.
those things come together, and I just enjoy putting flowers out into the world. And so that's why when I see someone like yourself that does beautiful work and cares about where their flowers come from and the seasonality and different things like that that I see, um, it just makes me appreciate people like you. So, anyway, but this isn't about me. This is about you.
I mean,
So,
it's really interesting though, because really, like, reps and people that supply flowers to us, like, such such a game changer to have someone that really is invested and cares, because that panic feeling that I'm sure all florists feel, like in working with a natural product, and just like I booked something that's last minute, that's several days from now, and just that feeling, I don't, it's not as strong of a panic, I shouldn't act like I'm currently panicking, but like, oh no, am I gonna get that exact color that I want, that exact thing that I want? And to have sales reps that are looking out, like, I don't know. I sometimes I think, am I just be another Tuesday to them? But they have saved my month. It's a really big sense of gratitude to have someone that you feel like is like in your corner, and like, yeah. So I'm just very grateful. I'm sure you saved many a people in your 26 years. It's no light thing, Scott.
thank you. Well, I always feel, and I know not all reps are like this, but I always feel like I'm part of your team as
Yeah.
I mean, that's because number one, I care. Number two, if you look good, then I look good.
Yeah.
And if I can be your eyes and ears when you're not in the house, you're not in the coolers and things are coming in, going, and things like that, especially now. And I wanted to talk about this briefly. It just came to me again, with the shortages going on,
Mhm.
with a lot of flowers, but you're in California where so many things are grown. Are you feeling the shortages on flowers like a lot of parts of the country are?
I know people are. I've talked to my reps a lot about it, and they say the people that are having the hardest time are people who are really rose reliant. So, like, a lot of their orders, they have like standing orders or really consistently use roses in a lot of their designs, because, I think majolicas were like really hard to get for a
Right.
while there. And then I was able to get, half of my order fulfilled a couple weeks ago, but they were like $23 a bunch, which they're like $12.50. That's almost double. So that is difficult, but I would say personally I haven't, but that's because of a couple different really great, like, I just hooked up with these couple local farms. And a huge thing I've talked to my reps about too is, like, I think that for me, I can't handle the stressor of committing to a certain flower.
How do you sell that to like your brides or your clients? Do you sell specific flowers, or do you sell, I mean, how, or do you sell like colors and
Yeah,
textures?
so
How do you do that?
that's what I do. And I do get occasional pushback. I think I'm really, really fortunate in that the clients, I mean, fortunate, but also like it's very intentional. Like, I don't want to ever, discredit myself. And also, like, there's effort put into it. It's not like total happenstance, but the work I put out there, I think, is like consistently like colorful and different. And so someone's going to either love it or hate it. And so if a client really loves it, they're going to book me, and generally they're going to trust and want me to like just do me, which sometimes is hard, because you're like, I'd love it though if you told me you hated something, because it's carte blanche is like really difficult, and it'll probably end up looking
Stressful.
bad. Yeah. And it's like, what did she do? Like, I need I think I create better with parameters. But for me, I always, like, on the phone, and then I reiterate via email, and then in my visual boards, I say, like, we do not commit to floral varieties. In my contract, it says that. It says that I have, the right to substitute if, I think my example in my contract is, like, if we had peach ranunculus on our order and they came in looking bad, I can substitute with peach sweet pea, and that's like a very different flower. Is a peach sweet pea even a thing? I just realized not really. But you know what I mean. Like, I don't commit to flower varieties because it's putting myself into a corner. And I know a lot of people do it differently and it works great for them. But for me, I also hate the fact that, like, what if I go to the market or the mart, or my rep texts me and they have some really rad flower that just came in that I didn't think to put on the proposal because I didn't even know it was in season. And then now it's like, ooh, but I didn't put it on the board. So I always tell people I commit to color palettes. I don't commit to flowers. But with that said, if there's a specific flower you really want, like I had a bride earlier this year that wanted gardenias for her hair, of course I'm going to, like, commit to gardenias, but it's with a lot of asterisks. It's like, I really hope I can. Usually we should be able to get this time of year. We're good to go, but you never know. Like, you really don't. So
yeah.
I don't know if that was
Well,
what you're asking.
I'm glad you said all that, because I feel like so many times people, go back to that fear of pricing. It's almost like we have this fear that we don't want to disappoint. And by not agreeing to specific blooms, that we're not fulfilling something, or it reflects on us badly some way. When in actuality, you're going to be in a position to offer the best blooms available at that time in those colors or in that palette, and it's worth developing that that language in your contracts and in your relationships with your clients, because it saves so much headaches in the end if you have that freedom to create with what's really pretty, I think.
It does. And I also think that asking more questions, because if you think about it, we see flowers and talk about them all the time. But if a lot of brides, like, this is the first time they're interacting with a florist. And so, yeah, they went on Pinterest or they follow some florist if they're really into flowers. A lot of clients that spend a lot of money typically are. They're like, flowers are the most important thing to me. So they send pictures, but they might have a lot of images that have that touch of delphinium blue, but you're like, are you open to maybe a lavender clematis? Like, maybe they don't know that, oh, actually, I really do, because it's kind of in the same family. Like, usually the touches of lavender and blue are kind of in the same realm. And so I think that, like, I always encourage people, like, don't be afraid, like, in conversation to, like, suggest something else, or like, what do you think about this? And send them an image they might not have come across, because we're seeing, floral content all the time. And I have had many, probably more often than not, encouraged a client that enthusiastically agrees, like, let's add a pop of, like, a chocolate Cosmo to make that palette more complex. And then, I don't know, I think sometimes people are surprised. Like, how do you get a client to do that? It's like, well, they didn't know. You have to offer that. Like, we're around it all the time. They don't know that kukura leaves are a thing. You have to, like, introduce it to them. So that's a part of just the educational process of what we do, though,
Sure. It's so funny you mentioning, like, that euchre leaves, and you just think where you're located in Southern California. You're just north of LA, right? And about maybe an hour, depends on traffic.
Sure. 1 hour to 5 hours,
Yeah. Do you have the opportunity to work with local growers very often?
So that's something that I just recently am getting more into. So where I live, Oxnard, it's really funny. Growers everywhere. When I go to the LA Mart, oftentimes, like, I'll ask, oh, where'd you get this from? Or where is this? Because they'll say locally grown. And it's Oxnard. For a lot of standards, like, there's a lot of lilies, carnations. I don't think, no, like, roses are more hothouse. It's like Ecuadorian. But a lot of, like, stock, there's actually a really beautiful stock and larkspur field. And sometimes we can smell it, like, in the evenings when it's growing. It's about 4 or 5 miles from me. I mean, the problem is, though, like, it's impractical, and they probably would turn me away if I was like, hi, can I have 10 bunches of that stock flower? So that's kind of like the annoying, like, you're so close but so far, because they're not going to deal with me. They're growing that stuff to sell it by the truckload to LA.
Right.
So that's been, and carpentry is similar. They have a lot of growers. So that's been kind of hard. I've actually thought over the years it'd be really cool to like form some sort of collective where like, but then I'd end up being a wholesaler to like sell like locally to Oxnard Ventura people, but it'd be more of a passion. I don't think I'd actually make money from it. So that's what's hard is that you're like, I could access that stuff technically, but not. So I end up just getting from like Mayash or Flora Abundance. I order a lot from, or I'll go to the mart like for a job this week. I'm going to LA because I need a lot of tropical stuff last minute. And I know that I need to access like a wider selection of things to pull from. So I've been connecting with these farms that are a little bit further of a drive for me, like probably an hour and a half in Fenines and one in Goleta. And it's been really great to connect with them. And I realize that I'm not going to be able to fulfill a whole order, you know,
Right.
because of color limitations and things like that. So I will have to always supplement. But to me, a lot of my philosophy is like every year doing better than the last and trying to make strides toward, you know, even flower foam. I've actually used more this year becoming a mother. It was just like a lot I went back to work at 8 weeks when she was 8 weeks old.
Wow.
And doing that, I used more boxes this year than I have like combined the last 3 or 4 years because I was really working toward being a lot more sustainable. But I think it's also moments of having grace with yourself of like, I'm doing the best I can. And I think that kind of philosophy in everything, like eating things, like I'm never going to eat French fries, but you know, especially lately, like 2020 was a crazy year, you know? But I think it's moderation, and I would love to source. And I even told one of the farmers that I'm like, I would love to be able to reach out to you now for spring weddings next year and have as much as I can from you. But also, I think you have to be realistic because there is imported stuff, like all that Holland product, all those Japanese sweet peas. You know, it's like that's the kind of stuff that makes it so you can be a high-end florist. Like you have to use that stuff to be able to reach that echelon of clientele, in my opinion, you know? But I think the flower world, I'm hoping, is moving in a different direction, you know? And even this farmer, he has really cool, what did he have that was really interesting? Japanese something. I just hope we can get those seeds over here, you know what I mean? I heard there's like what do they call that? There's like a liability thing, or they have like oh my gosh, what's the word? A license on like
Oh,
the
right.
sweet peas and things like that. But we can harness that and get it stateside, then that would be a really cool accomplishment, I think, for our industry.
Well, I know that I've seen, like, for example, gosh, I don't even know how many years it's been now. COVID has messed with my timeline,
I
obviously.
know.
I want to say 3 years ago, I visited some Japanese growers that grow the most insane Lysianthus. And I was really happy to start seeing some of those varieties popping up being grown here in the US.
That's
Because
cool.
it just takes time for either the seed volume or the plant material volume to reach this critical mass where it can now be done in other places in the world. And so I feel like, I mean, it does take time, but it is definitely exciting to see, and hopefully more of those kinds of things will keep happening here in the U.S. as the demand for local flowers keeps growing.
It's true. And it's like what they say with everything else that we shop for. You know, if you want to see more of something, then you have to put your money toward it. And if you want to see more locally grown flowers, then you have to start ordering more locally grown flowers. And it is an inconvenience in a way, but I think it's a challenge because it's like putting your money where your mouth is. It's easy, even calling myself out, it's easy to say that you want that, but then am I willing to now drive 3 hours round trip to get something like that? But again, I think it's each job is different. Like I have a smaller wedding this weekend that I'm like, I can't go all the way to the farm just for that small order. So
Right.
I'm going to probably just get a lot of imports because that's on her mood board. It's a lot of imports and that's okay. But the next job, I'll try to make up for it. And I'm using a lot of locally grown garden roses from Rose Story. So I think that, every job is just like doing the best you can, really.
No, that's a good point. And I do, and it is hard too when you're in a service industry, I think, because you obviously are trying to provide what your client wants, and you can try to steer
Mhm.
them in a certain way. And I mean, you could put your feet down and say, no, I'm not doing this. This is all I'm doing. But I think where you're located, especially, that can be challenging because, when you have a high end clients, which you do in Southern California, that, you're trying to achieve a certain look. And I think just being aware. I mean, how many times are people just not aware? And being aware and
Yeah.
making those strides is so important. So I commend you for that and making the effort when you can and doing that. That's great. I think too, one of the things I'm kind of curious about is when it comes to like the business side of some of this. I know that pricing is different for everybody, so I don't know if that's what is one thing. I don't know if that's one thing that we really need to get into detail because everyone has different cost of goods and things. But what is an area that you feel like maybe you struggled with and now you're doing better, or maybe you're still working through as far as managing your business? Because you're doing this now 8 years. You obviously you've proven your concept, you've proven what you do. And I'm just curious if there's anything that, maybe could help other people that are out there.
I mean, it's hard because I could talk forever about so many different topics. So like, generally speaking, it's hard to think on the spot. Like if you had a specific thought, I love,
Okay.
I'm trying to think of things I've learned from so many things. I think oh gosh, boundaries are huge. Like I think boundaries are a really big thing that I've learned a lot from, that I'm constantly learning from. The balance, personal life, like work-life balance. It's really hard when you own your own business, especially now as a mother, because sometimes the only time that I get to reply to emails are in the evening when she's gone to bed. But then that's my time with my husband. But I am even moving toward this place of like, I think now is the time, I've never done this, where I should have office hours. I think 2020 has done this in a positive way, affected people, where we're realizing priorities and like life is too short. And
Yes.
if it means I lose a client here or there because I didn't get back to them, really quickly, then that just has to be okay, and kind of trusting that the people that you're meant to work with will work out. I've seen people on the bottom of their email say like office hours, like 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. Like this is when I reply to emails. If you email me at 7, I'm not going to get back to you until the next day.
That's fair.
And I think for years, I would like draft emails at night and then send them in the morning. I don't want them to know I was emailing them at 10 p.m. I want them to think I am chill and together. But I think that that's one thing I've learned a lot about is like, I have to still mentally remind myself, Jennifer, it's okay. You just got that inquiry that's really exciting. And it's not some sort of power play to not respond to them for a while. It's like, I'm busy. Even if busy means spending time eating dinner right now with my family, like that is valuable busyness.
Yes.
I don't need to be on a job to say like, I can't get back to this email right now. So boundaries are so huge. Like, I think it's just taken time though to learn that the work's always going to be there. I think 2020 kind of messed with us, but
Well, the thing I
yeah,
love about that, I think, if somebody emails you at 7 o'clock at night and you don't respond right away, I'm kind of like, do you really want a client like that? That's going to be
exactly.
that demanding of your time?
Exactly. And that's not super common. Like I don't have someone that emails me at 7 and the next morning is like, hello. Like it's not, that's the thing. If it's not even people being demanding, it's just this, I think that I still am realizing that there's this remnant feeling of the beginning of my career where there's that hustle where you're like, I know I have to work for work. I have to take everything that comes my way just to get the experience and there's that really, hard nose of the grindstone, is that the term?
Mhm.
Of just like, take it all, take it all, take it all. And I think I'm realizing it's taken a while for me to mentally catch up with the reality of where my business is at. Like, I don't have to do that anymore. Not in the sense, I've not arrived in the sense where like, oh, I have more than enough work all the time. I'm still always like wanting a few more jobs or still have goals with my business. But definitely like, I don't need to be responding obsessively to things. I think that's just hard. I think, especially when you rely on it as income, like this is my income, it's my full-time job. There's just can be that anxiety of like, I need work, you know? But the balance, that's something that I think has been really huge for me that I've learned. Probably wasn't, I'm trying to think of other things that are, have been really huge for me in business.
I can totally respect the idea that we're all learning about boundaries because I even, like even like on social media, sometimes you get things happening and then it's like you feel like you have to always be on, which is kind of frustrating, I know. Um, when it comes time for you to market your business or to get out there and sort of beat the bushes, so to speak, um, is there anything that you found that really works for you?
In terms of marketing,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's what's interesting is that my business, 2014, I think Instagram came out like around that year. And the evolution of it has been crazy because there was definitely like a big spike in my followers in those early years. And it's kind of tapered off recently, but that was a huge way that I got business. And I think it still is. And now I try to see it more of like a living portfolio. Like I think the followers and engagement you can't control, but you can control constantly putting out what you're creating. And I think that's the most important thing to do. And you might not know the real impact it's making, but I still get emails of like, I was looking at your Instagram and love your work. And to me, I'm like, that's all I need to know, all I need to hear to keep sharing stuff, not just for the likes or, you know,
Followers.
whatever the followers or all that, but just to show people. I think people really want to hire someone that's passionate. And I am passionate about flowers. Like it's something that I love all art forms really, like kind of what we were discussing before we went live here, but just saying that I love the business part of what I do too. And it's not like I got into this because I was passionate about flowers. I got into it because there was a need and the passion has followed and only grown. Especially like, it's amazing to me how endless flowers are. Just when you think like you've seen it all, you're like, what is this? It's so amazing. It's truly amazing to me. And I think that that's a huge marketing point too, is just like your enthusiasm. Like your enthusiasm really translates over Instagram. And I wish there were other ways to market, but it kind of feels like that's it right now. I'm sure we'll have other means in the future, but I don't know. Don't you kind of feel like that too? Like you've been in the industry for so long. I know that like magazines and stuff and then blogs for a while, but then I'm kind of like, is that really helpful? Like, is that going to get you the clients? I think for some people, yes, but I don't think for me that is great for my target audience.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I think sometimes people feel overwhelmed by social media and creating content and to know people like to think that that translates into reaching out to clients. I feel like that not everybody is maybe gets that kind of feedback, but I think that comes with time and you've got to put the time in order to get to that point. And I feel like sometimes it feels like there's nothing coming out of it and you just I don't know. I'm glad to hear that you get clients from your social media presence and that they see your look, they see your aesthetic, they see what you do, and they want more of that. They want that for themselves or for their own wedding. And that doesn't happen overnight, right? And it just takes a lot of work to be persistent at it. So
yeah, and I think it's not the only. It's funny because I spoke at this thing a few years ago, and this woman came up to me afterwards and she was just talking about how she was so discouraged that she didn't have a lot of followers. But then, in a blunt conversation, we were just talking about like projected numbers for the year. Like, what do you need? What gross or net do you need to like have the income that you do? And she was telling me like she was so successful to me from my perspective, just monetarily, and just the amount of clients that she's had, her wedding like volume, and then the money that she was making. But she was so bummed out about her Instagram followers, as if like I just think the perception, and that's like a real conversation, the perception versus reality that I even fall prey to because I'm in business. Of course, I'm going to market myself a certain way. I try to be more transparent in the sense of like, I have a job this weekend. I don't think I overinflate how busy I am. And then when I don't have a lot of work, I'm not sharing as much. But I think that there's this weird idea of like success and it's backwards. Like, isn't the goal, like I would hope the goal for me is like, I'd love to not have to post ever. I'm just getting so many inquiries and so much business that I can just share here and there if I want, but really I don't need to. Like, that sounds great. And I think it's sad because somehow the goal has been to be more of like an influencer than it is to make a living doing what you love. Like, how cool is it that we can make money making flower arrangements, in essence, really like moving buckets and spreadsheets. That's like a big part of our business. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. I could talk about Instagram for a while because there's so much, it's a mental game and it's a lot of smoke and mirrors and false perceptions, and just brings me great sadness how much anxiety it creates in myself and other people. I don't know one person that's like, love Instagram, it's great. Every time I leave the app, I'm happier. I feel like it's generally like lots of sadness, and it's like, what is the world, you know, sometimes.
That's a great point, because you just feel like, yeah, it's almost like putting the cart before the horse. It's like Instagram, ideally, like you described, should just come from our overflow of beautiful blooms or great looking weddings and things like that. And you just enjoy just sort of sharing that beauty out into the world. And, you know, if it comes back to you, great, and it probably will, but it's, yeah, not this idea that I'm comparing myself to the Joneses next door or something. Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think it's in our nature, though, as humans, though, you know, to like compare. And I think sometimes I do feel guilty because I'm like, should I be more real and share like the real nitty gritty? But then a part of me is like, I mean, two things. This might sound intense. I thought about this a lot. Mm-hmm. I'm like, one part of it is like, I don't owe that to people. I think there's this weird pressure that like you owe it to to people, to strangers, to like be honest. If that means you can get more followers by being like, hey guys, it's me, Jen, just want to have like a real conversation about money and business. It's like, you know, I don't need to sell myself that way. And also, like, I wanted to be a stand-up comedian for a while, and I was like, maybe I should just be funny and like entertain people. But then it feels like you're like a monkey and like, oh, I'm just here for the tricks and followers and follow me, look over here, flashy lights. And I think that like that's fun. I should also say that's fine. Like, there are people, I follow a lot of comedians, I follow a lot of people that do are like, hey, it's me, blah, blah, blah. Here's some cool flower tips. And that's really cool content. But also, like, I don't think that everyone should feel like they have to do that to get business. And if there's a lot of anxiety associated with that, like, it is not worth it. That's another like 2020 thing. It's like, life is too short. Like, why do we put so much stock in what strangers think about us, in essence? Like, it's a really interesting, I feel like you could psychoanalyze that for a long time. I think we want validation from people as human beings, and that's totally fine. That's good and well and like a part of our nature. But then I think we all know when it crosses over into like the danger zone of like, I need this too much and I need a break because this is silly, you know?
That's interesting. Yeah, there's definitely a balance. And I've been accused of being on too much versus finding the balance, the middle ground sometimes. I think just because I've followed so many people for so long that I get excited about it, but I'm also not in the same position that you're in, you know, and that's one of the things I find really intriguing about your area of the country is there's so many floral designers. And how do you balance the whole competition versus collaboration, or do you view things that way? Because being in such a mecca for flowers where you were located, do you feel like there's more designers in your part of the world than in other places?
Yeah, and this is something that I talked to a planner about that was in New York several years ago. And they made such an interesting point that I saw a lot about, because they said you can't be like a hobbyist florist in New York, in the sense that like you can't just do it on the side. You don't have the space for it. Whereas maybe in California, and I'm sure other parts of the country, like you can have a part or full time job, and then do flowers in your garage or in your spare bedroom or living room, whatever it is, because you have the space, and we have like, driveways and such to be able to operate a flower business. Whereas in New York, it's like, in other parts of the country that I'm sure are cities and things like that, it's high stakes. Like you make it or don't. What is the term for that? Like this is real baby brain right now. You thrive or dive. I just made that up.
There you go. I
So
like that.
me too. I just love that part.
There's a t-shirt there.
There is a t-shirt there. Maybe that's going to be my side hustle. So I think that's really interesting, because there are so many florists. And I think, there's so many conversations in the flower world, because you have a lot of different types of florists here in California. You have the people like me where it's like, I need this to make a living. You have people that are doing it like what we talked about, like for fun, and I think, to be honest, of course, I've gone through the gamut of emotions of like, that's frustrating, that's my competition. But then I've come to this like really great place of like, there's so much business. There's more business than I think we even realize, and especially in Southern California. There's so many venues, so many planners, so many people getting married. And I just don't think, I think some people are still, have a lot of opinions about other ways people do business in competition. But I have found personally that it's just not worth it for my emotional mental health to like be so invested in the way that other people do things and be secretive, or not secretive. Like, I think maybe this is something interesting that you'd have a lot of insight into also, because the way that the flower world has transformed so much over the decades. I worked for someone for a while who's been doing this for 20, 30 years, before Pinterest, before everything. And she'd book clients and they would just trust her. Like, what else are they going to do? You're not going to send over mood boards and all these images. It's like pre-internet, basically. And so now I think it's interesting, because that era of business is very like, these are my sources. I keep them close. I don't share these things. And that's not necessarily wrong. That's like a way that a lot of people do business in the world. Whereas Instagram and the internet has opened up a world of like sharing and a lot of more discourse and sharing sources. And again, I think that's a balance. If you talk to me in person, I'll tell you everything. I'm not going to go on the internet right now and on Instagram and like randomly willfully give up a lot of my information. But if we're having a genuine conversation, like, sure, let's talk about that. I think that for me, it's not worth it to hold those things so close. And the sooner I think that you let go of that, the more that you thrive, because you're not in a state of like constantly protecting. And yeah, and I wonder if that was kind of what you were asking, just like how you deal with competition. And I say, obviously, too, that becoming a mom, things have changed a lot for me mentally. It's like priorities have shifted a lot to where I think that I have my business in a proper state of mind, in a proper place in my life of like, if I can help out other people, great. It's like, we're all in this together. This is also a 2020 lesson. It's like, we're all just trying to do our best, make a living, spend time with our family, eat good food in that order. And like, so yeah, that's kind of my evolving philosophy, new philosophy.
And I'm glad you said that, because it is evolving. I feel like, and that's okay. Something doesn't have to be rigid in this department. It can definitely be fluid. And I think that people in different places and, have different feelings about it. And I think I appreciate the fact that you're right. 2020 has impacted us, whether we even recognize it yet or not, in lots of ways on how we want to guard, like you talked about earlier, our boundaries, or prioritize how we spend our time. And then when you're dealing with other businesses around you that may be doing the same thing, it's like I think this. I agree with what you said. The sooner you can let it go, and not let that drain you, because it really does drain you of energy, I think.
Oh my gosh. And for what? You know, like what are you gaining from that? Because the reality is you can't control the way other people do things. You just can't. I mean, that's like a huge lesson in life that I've learned in therapy. That's a huge thing too. Like the sooner you can let go, the fact that you can't manage other people and the way people are going to do things. And just, I really believe that things come to you that need to come to you. I think that like the people that have come into my world professionally, like that God has put them there and there's a reason for them. And the ones that don't. And that's really hard. It's really easy to say until
Right.
you're bidding a job that you really wanted. And you're like financially, this has been really great for my family, would have paid my mortgage for a while, like whatever the thoughts are, as well as portfolio. And I really want to work with this planner. And those moments of disappointment are a really big bummer. But I think that, you know, time and distance away from those jobs, looking back, I'm like, wow, I'm so grateful that actually a really interesting insight. Like for me, when COVID happened in March of 2020, I only had a couple jobs booked at that time for the year. And I wasn't too worried because the bulk of my jobs end up being in the fall. I think that's just like maybe typical for a lot of Southern California people. And I usually get a lot of inquiries in the spring. But I was bummed because, of course, I'm thinking like, I'm a loser. I don't book anything. You know, all the fun, self-deprecating things we like to do to ourselves. And then 2020 happened. And then I ended up getting pregnant in July, had a baby. And it all worked out to where I was able to spend, you know, so much time with her, so much time being pregnant, not working, and then so much time with my husband, and then so much time with my new baby. And I don't have a lot of postponements this year that I know a lot of people are really struggling with because they're doing the postponements and then booking on top of that new jobs to make money. And I'm just like, wow, see, that is something where in the moment in, you know, January 2020, I was like, how could this be good? How could not having work be good? But then look how it turned out. And so that to me was such a big lesson in like trusting that even when things look bleak from your perspective, like you just don't know. You didn't book that job. Well, you don't know like what else is going to come around the corner that you wouldn't be able to take if you got that. So that's a huge way that I comfort myself in, you know, the ups and downs of business is that also that's a big thing too, is like your business isn't meant to like always incline every year, grow. Like that's not sustainable. And like, who wants that? Because at that trajectory, like I'm way too busy in 10 years from now. I think knowing there's ebbs and flows and like rolling with it and accepting, you know, that's just how business is. I think this is another Instagram thing, like the perception of like bigger, better, like that's remembering. I have to remind myself, like, these are other people's business accounts too. Like it's in their interest to promote and to be like big and flashy. And that's not wrong. I don't think that that's lying or dishonest. That's just that's business. So remembering like there are downs that we don't see, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's an important lesson too, because I know I had a friend and she's passed away a couple years ago, and she primarily did like some funeral business. That was her big thing. And most of what she did, she could manage herself without having a lot of extra employees or a lot of rental situations. And she liked her business that size. She liked her business that size. She liked how it was manageable, how she could wrap her hands around it. And I mean, yes, she'd call in freelancers and things like that sometimes. But overall, it was the size she liked it. And I think bigger isn't always better.
It's not.
If you're not,
Definitely not.
if you don't have that personality, or maybe you haven't been in a position to put that team in place yet, you know, maybe it ends up creating extra stress sometimes.
It does. It does.
And then what is your profitability when it's all said and done? So
I know. And I've done that. You know, I've had a couple big jobs that made me really rethink like, was this the goal, and when did it become the goal, and why? And I think it's, I don't want to vilify, again, like businesses that go on Instagram and promote bigger is better, because it's in their interest. And that's silly for me to think they're going to do otherwise. And maybe it is in their interest because that's how they work better. They have a really big team. Maybe they have a really great workspace on their property at their home, or they have a great studio. Like, you don't know how these people are running their businesses. You don't know where they're coming from financially. You don't know like what their personality is like, and how they prefer to work. And to compare yourself to someone like that, there are companies I follow that I adore that they're machines. Like, they're making the craziest, coolest big installs. And I think it's taken me years to be like, I can look at that and really admire it and respect it, while at the same time thinking that's not for me. Rather than the previous thought, and I think the thought that can creep into some of our minds, like, I wish I had that. Like, I wish I had, like, do you though? Do you want to do what it takes to get to where they are? Because if you don't, then you have to have like a reckoning moment with yourself of like accepting that I don't want to work 80 hours a week and stay up until 2 a.m. doing these crazy big installs. So that's something that I've come to terms with too, is like what I'm capable of, what I think is actually realistic for, my life, my new lifestyle too, as a mom, while still challenging myself and not putting myself in a box for like where things could go.
Yeah, for sure. You've given so much good insights, actually, into how you've managed and grown through the last couple of years with your business. What piece of advice would you give either people starting out new, or maybe it's a piece of advice that means a lot to you that someone shared with you?
Like, in light of what we've kind of gone through collectively as the world in 2020.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. I mean, this is definitely the way that my husband and I choose to live. And we've talked about this with family members, but I think it's looking at your priorities. And for me personally, the most important thing to me is time, is like the time I can spend with people that I love and care about. And that is the limiting factor that we all live by. And I know there are very real constraints, like building a retirement and paying for our bills. And I think like taking a good hard look at what really matters to you and having a real talk with yourself and making decisions that come from that place of those strong convictions. And for my husband and I, like, we are able to spend so much time with, like, there have been jobs I've turned down because of the logistics of it and had to be back to back with something else. And it's like, it's more valuable to me to spend time with my family. And that's not an easy thing. It's not like, transparent to be transparent. I'm not like flowing in the cash and it's totally fine. It's like, that will be a sacrifice for me to not take that. But I think that realizing like that is a decision I made and that's a priority for me. And I can't, if I start making decisions now where money and success and reputation are what guide me, like, when does it end? And I think that was a big 2020 realization for me of like, this trajectory is just doesn't seem like it's going in a great place. Not that I was in a bad place prior to that, but it was a great time, a gift in a lot of ways, even through all the hardship of like, almost like a moment to pause. Like, when else would I have gotten that until I'm, in my late 60s, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was forced, but it was like, what really matters? And so that's maybe advice that I encourage people to do. I hate giving advice though, because it's like, that's coming from my personality, the way that like I see the world. And so, and I have a child, not everybody has kids or is married. So I think it's all really different. But yeah, most people I've been talking to, planners, florists, I think there's this really cool, like, rawness that's happening in conversations with clients even too. I think a lot of the facade's been pulled back and we're just like two humans talking about, this job. And we want, every planner I've talked to, it's like, we want clients that we really fit with. And I think that that's something we should all lean into, is like not trying to take every job that comes our way, blah, blah, blah. Like if we actually all lean into what our strengths are and the personalities that we work best with, then we're all going to naturally, I think, gravitate toward work that fits best with what we do, and charging more, because that's one big thing. Side note, just because like, the shortages and how everything's affected the industry and how busy everybody is, like I think we all deserve to be making what we're worth, and the time that we put into this, if we're really passionate about what we do. And yeah, that's it. That wasn't wrapped up with a bow, but that's my 2 cents. That's like 20 cents. That wasn't just 2 cents.
One thing in saying that, I know one of the things that I could imagine being a potential issue is, like if you're dealing with a wedding planner or an event planner, and they come to you and like you said, you're on back-to-back events or weddings, and they come to you and you value that relationship, but yet you feel like you have to say no. Do you get pushback from them at all, or do you feel like there's repercussions from that, or do they respect that?
I think people respect that. I think you're never going to know. We're all, we're Americans. We're not super blunt. I don't think you're ever going to really know, like, does this affect my future? I thought that as a mom, even. I was like, oh no, people aren't going to take me seriously as like a mother and a professional. I wasn't that concerned. I'm overstating it. I was a little like, how will this play out? Like, will this make people not want to work with me as much because they know that my attention's spread in different directions? But it's really interesting that like, no, nobody cares. Like, as long as you can do your job and you create beautiful things and you get things in on time and you show up on time and work hard, like generally people don't respect that a lot. And I think that, if you can't do a job, that's part of like the risk in a sense, but like sticking with your convictions, like I would love to do this and being honest. Like, I think that that's a huge part of business I've learned too, is I'm slowly kind of letting this guard down of like, hello, it is me, Jennifer Sanchez. I'm trying to feel like, oh, my emails, like I put smiley faces in my email. And I'm like, you know what? If that's going to have me lose some jobs because I want to throw a smiley face in there, that's just ridiculous. Like, I want to work with people that are enthusiastic and happy. And I should say that, like, we're in a creative field. Like, you can get away with a lot, like, as the florist, So I think that that's something, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I feel like too, and again, it goes back to kind of like what we were saying earlier, that if that no ends up affecting you negatively, then maybe that just wasn't a good fit to begin with.
I agree. And I would hope that people respect you more for it and want to work with you even more. Like, it's kind of the idea that people think that if you're a yes person, then, only positive things can come from it. When, like, think about it in the reverse. I really, like, great example I have, really random. But when I was 18, I wanted a tattoo on my neck. Right here, I wanted this, like, leaf. And the guy looked at me and he was like, do you have any other tattoos? I said, no. He said, I'm not doing that. I'm not putting a tattoo on an 18-year-old's neck as no other tattoos. And you know what I thought in that moment? Wow, I feel like you're looking out for me. I trust the next thing that comes out of your mouth. I just trust you more because I feel like you're willing to say no. And I think you have to think that way with business too. Like, people actually respect you when you're like, I can't do that. I will not be doing that load in at that time. That's not going to work for me and my team. I think, yeah, like getting rid of that's a big lesson I guess I've learned over the years too, going back to our previous conversation, is that people respect you when you have boundaries, because you're saying, this is what people feel comfortable. Don't we all feel comfortable when someone gives us guidelines of like, this is how I work? Kind of like the palette where it's like, do whatever you want. I'm like, actually, that's not helpful. I really like if you're like, I hate orange, I love pink, and I love ferns. Wow, I can make you something beautiful within those parameters. And like, I think people thrive in parameters,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's so true. I know, how so many times people would call me. I had one client especially who would do multiple events or weddings in a weekend. But they had a huge staff, and it was a big deal. And they'd get some client that would pop up with some party, and they just said yes to everything. So I'd get a phone call. I'm like, this is the colors. This is, kind of the look. And then I was the one who pulled the flowers.
That's cool. So
and it is cool,
fun.
but at the same time, it was stressful for me because I'm kind of like,
Oh
it's not
yeah.
my business really, and it's kind of like, but eventually you just get to but why was that stressful? Because I wasn't confident at that time. And then later on, as the more I did that for them, I'm like, oh, they like my taste in flowers. That's why they're calling me because
Yep.
that's what they wanted. And I think that there's a lot of things to be said that should empower us as creative people because of people that come back to us, or they come to us because of our Instagram, or they come to us because they've been to one of our weddings that we've done and they've said, wow, I want that look. And instead of selling ourselves short, I want to try to tie everything in here at once now, selling ourselves short and not pricing it correctly, or not being confident in saying, this is how I work. I don't want to, promise flowers that are going to be difficult, or whatever, and it's like, or setting those boundaries about load-in times or whatever it is, I'm sure I'm missing some things, but all in all, it's not a bad thing and we don't need to be afraid of it.
No, I agree. And I think that, like, just to tack on, I think that what I've learned too is that I think what would be helpful for florists too is if we talk to other professionals in different industries, because I think there's a lot of things that I didn't know were allowed. Am I allowed to tell the planner that that's not going to work for my team? Like, I think that somehow the flower world has fallen into this crack, and I'm sure there's other industries like this, of like, we don't follow a lot of normal professionalism rules of, like, even negotiating rates with freelancers. Like, that should be really normal, but like somehow it's not. Like, hi, I'm so sorry, but I'm actually, for this job, can we do this, and that? Like, there's a lot of negotiation, I feel like, is a normal thing in business, but like not in the flower world. It feels like there's these things that we haven't been empowered to do because a lot of us did fall into this, or a lot of us are creatives that then made it into a business rather than a business person that finds out what they want to do with business. So yeah, I think that that's really interesting, is like the word empowering. Like, I really even still want to go back and take some classes at the local Ventura College of business classes, because there's so many things that I'm like, probably could be really buttoned up and I could benefit from, but kind of fell into this. So.
Well, that's great. Well, I so appreciate this time. You've been so generous, and I really appreciate your transparency, because I feel like, we throw around these words about transparency or being authentic, and I feel like, I feel like in a way what you've said today, just, I know that it speaks to people where they're at, and I just thank you for that.
Yes, I always try to be, because people have been that way to me and it's changed my life and my perspective. So it's just kind of like passing it along.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the Flower Podcast.
Yes, it's so fun, Scott. We could talk forever.
I know. I can't even believe the time's up. So anyway,
Same.
Till next time. So.